taking a lot of your time, but I thought that I was doing the community a favor with the conflict of interest that is in Gary. I want everyone here to realize that every single board member was sent a special invitation on all 3 boards. Rivers was sent the hub an invitation, and so was APEC. I am here only for conflict of interest. It is some of the members, not all the members, because some of them are strictly not for it, and some are strictly for Know Your Facts USA. But some of the people that are here also put together a wind ordinance. Some of the folks that worked on that wind ordinance committee is not here, but they're over on the table. If you want to take a look at them and you want to take and send one to Bridget, you can. I do not want to talk at all about the wind. If you want or have any questions on the wind, you can talk with William or Alex, and of course Brad, our speaker tonight. I am very disappointed in our boards. I know they give time, and I have always been trying to be very respectful to them. But I will have to say now I'm going to gather all the information, and this is going public. Everything that we have gathered, we are having the Attorney General review and also the Board of Integrity. If they didn't have the decency to even come and be part of this so that you could talk to them, I don't feel that they are representing you, and I hope that you understand this when it comes to voting. May God bless each of you for coming, and we'll start our presentation. We're going to have an opening by John Metzler.
Good evening. I'd like to start with a quote from Shawnee Chief Tecumseh. He once said, and I quote, "So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion. Respect others and their views, and demand they respect yours. Love life. Perfect your life. Beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in service of your people. In my 61 years of life, I've learned the hard way that truth, honor, and integrity can only be a part of everyone's life if faith is the guidepost." So at this time, I'd like to pray. Father, we thank you for bringing us together. These are definitely different times that we face, and we're facing it just not in New York State, but in other parts of the world as well, Lord. We pray that we can change the minds and the hearts, and that you'll change the minds and the hearts of our leaders, Lord, to prevent this catastrophe from hitting us. And we all know the illnesses and the calamity that these things cause, Lord, and we hope that through us, with your guidance, that we can actually make a change, we can make a difference, and we can stop this from harming our children, our environment, and the animals, all the things that you do, Lord, and gave us the duty to care for. So we thank you for that. We pray for safe travel for everyone tonight, and we pray that you'll give us all wisdom, discernment, and understanding in the presentation. Thank you. This time we'd like to pledge to the allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to introduce our speaker. I'd like to introduce our speaker, but firstly, we'll talk about his goals, please. Brad holds a bachelor's degree of science from the University of Toronto. He also holds a master's of business degree from the University of Rochester. He worked for Kodak as a research chemist for 3 years and in human resources for 26 years. Currently, he's co-president of Figure Lakes Preservation Society. He's a former town supervisor for the town of Italy, New York, where he is now a current member of the town planning board. Brad is going to speak to us tonight about Article 10 processes, New York State open meeting laws, and will present an unbiased overview of the industrial wind turbines and their actual environmental impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present Brad Jones.
Thank you. Let me tell you what I'm not going to do tonight. I'm not going to try to convince you of anything. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. What I'm going to do is to share with you the things that we've learned over the last 16 or 17 years involved in industrial wind developments. Okay? And these are not my opinions that I'm going to share with you tonight. Basically, we have a small team of people, all different areas of technical expertise. And for example, one of our key members, he actually worked full-time for us for 3 years, his named Thor Vandeheide. Thor has his PhD from University of California, San Diego, I believe. He was available to us for 3 years while his wife was working on her PhD thesis. So he was our go-to technical guy. And he would review everything that we had come up with, all the materials, and he would interpret them, explain them, and rewrite them. So with people like that, we have engineers, mechanical engineers, sound engineers, all kinds of folks. So this is not just an opinion, it's verified information based upon peer-reviewed papers and studies. Okay? Everybody okay with that? All right. We could start with a slide there. Robin? You need a slide.
Okay. You got it done.
I think you need to bring it back up. It's gone to sleep.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not technically.
This is for you.
No.
You're gonna have to here's that.
What did it go to? To go get our technical manager.
Sorry about that.
Everything went out. Money. And do a different.
So as the slide indicates, we've been doing this for 14 or 15 years. And when Ecogen, that was a small LLC out of the Buffalo area, it was 2 people. One guy was a developer, he had a few $1 million. And they came in and began to sign up landowners in the town. They also worked without anybody knowing with the town supervisor. And he got 400 acres of his land signed up. And so then it was a struggle from that every day. After 8 years, we lost a Supreme Court lawsuit, but they ran out of money. So they're gone, and we may again see new developers try to come in. We've got some beautiful hills with pretty good wind. But we've also changed the way that we're using our zoning laws. In the past, what our planning board would do is whenever a new threat was coming in, they'd call a moratorium, 6 months, and then write something to deal with that particular challenge, whatever it was. So we had this really complicated code that was written by so many different people for so many years, it was almost not understandable. So what we said is, let's go back to our comprehensive plan, which was written in 2005, and that lays out, this is what the people of the town want for their future. That should be the basis for all of your zoning code. So we went back in that, looked at the surveys and said, okay, what was most important to people? Natural peace and quiet in the town, scenic beauty, recreational opportunities. Nobody thought they wanted to have anything industrial. In fact, they wanted us to avoid any industrial development in town. So therefore, we went back from the beginning and said, let's identify what impacts we want to evaluate from any type of project. It could be a noise impact, it could be traffic, it could be emissions, whatever it happened to be. So we have a list of these, and we apply those to any new development that's coming into the town. Basically, our people are saying, we really love the peace and quiet here. So if someone's coming in and they're going to have 40 deliveries an hour, in Italy Valley Road, it's probably not going to be approved. But it's a better way to think about what you're protecting, because you're always talking about protecting the rights of the people of the town in terms of the future that they chose. Next slide, please. But when this first came in, I mean, I was open. I didn't know much about industrial wind at the time. I'm thinking, you know what? We've got good wind up here, we know that. We know that. It's good wind resource at 1,900 feet above sea level. And we've got a lot of space. We used to have a lot of farms in our town. At that time, we'd done like 4% of our land was in agriculture. Now it's growing, growing, growing. But at that time, there were lots of places to put turbines. And so we said, yeah, because people were telling us we might be able to, abandon some old coal plants. We had them over in Seneca Lake that we'd probably get rid of. Remember, foreign oil was an issue at that point with OPEC raising their hackles back 15 years ago. Lease payments for landowners would be good, because a lot of our folks are kind of scraping by. It's even another 3, 4, 5,000 would make a difference. But first time we went to a presentation with a developer, they showed us a whole bunch of slides, and from my background, every single slide was falsified. They showed, for example, a slide that was a graph, and it showed the relationship between elevation and wind speed. And it basically said that wind speed continues to increase as elevation increases, with virtually no end to that. How do planes fly then? If that's true, you're at 35,000 feet, you must be battling a headwind that's 4,000 miles an hour. So, nonsense. They showed us a picture outside of Paris. I was working out of Paris at that time. They showed a nuclear plant with a coal plant next to it. There aren't any coal plants in France. They're 100% nuke. So again, they're lying almost because they can, often without even reason. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I want to focus that we're not opposed to wind energy. We're opposed to wind energy in rural recreational areas. In other words, nice, quiet, beautiful places where people also live. First thing we're concerned about is taxation versus pilot. Does everybody know what a pilot is? A payment in lieu of taxes. In other words, your property, a portion of your property, taken off the tax roll so you don't get taxed, but you agree also to pay money, a certain amount of money. Pilots were intended to reward developers for coming in and creating good paying jobs. That was the purpose of the pilots. Wind projects, like our one in Cohocton, employed 300 people at one time. 300 people. 150 were from out of state, from Pennsylvania and Minnesota. That money isn't staying in New York. The other 150 were mostly illegal aliens. Okay? They didn't stay around too long either. After those 300, we also had 6 iron workers out of Rochester hired as crane operators. So we had 6 jobs for 18 months, 6 real jobs for people that live near us. No other jobs. Right now, I think there's 1 part-time person there. But also the pilot that was set up there was negotiated by the town of Cohocton. Typically, IDAs do that, but they wanted to do their own. So they got a pilot that was going to pay them about $500,000 a year, which in a town like Cohocton or Italy, that's a lot of money. I mean, my budget as town supervisor was $600,000. So somebody's going to come in and give us $500,000, that kind of gets our attention. Well, I was over in Cohocton not too long ago and learned that pilot isn't there anymore. The developer canceled the pilot and instead did a host agreement with the county, Steuben County. So Cohocton's not getting any of that money, but in the years they were getting it, they increased their spending. So now their taxes that you would pay if you were there, were up 36% year before last and 48% this year. Because they got to make up for all the stuff they bought and all they have to take care of. So you want to be real careful about working on the taxation of pilot thing without understanding all the issues. Now, every single turbine that's ever been built is going to need to be decommissioned at some point. Anybody ever fly into LA, go over Altamont Pass? You ever notice that? Just on the side of Palm Springs? There are 10,000 turbines there, dead. Some of them no blades, some are tipped over, broken, some of them hit by lightning. There's no decommissioning funds. Now, what does it cost to take down a 4.2 megawatt unit, would you think? That's what they're proposing for here. It's probably more between 500,000 and $1 million. Just think about getting something that's 600 feet in the air. It's already in rough shape because they're decommissioning it. So there's lots of bad things that can happen taking a tower of that size. So if you're going to get, but it's not just the tower, you got the blades and nacelle. How far down does the foundation go? Do you know? Anybody know? The 1.5s in Cohocton went down 25 feet. I'm guessing the 4.2s are going to have to go down further than that. I don't know, but
We were told.
it's a whole lot of concrete.
First time we asked the question, we were told it was gonna be 60 feet, which was pretty deep. Then it came up at a town board meeting, and Ben said it was only 10 feet.
No, it can't be 10 feet. One of the other things you want to think about too, I'm going to get into propagation of infrasound. If you, in fact, so where we are, if you were going down 50 feet, you're into bedrock. Any place where we live. And that bedrock is shale, and it propagates infrasound immensely well.
Is that 50 feet, is that for 500 foot or 600?
600.
So if you're going to have a project, they have to put up a bond. They can't have a promise. You need a bond that a third party holds. And it has to be for full decommissioning costs. And the cost I didn't mention is what you do with all this stuff. Because some parts of it, a gearbox, you can recycle. The tower itself, I don't think you're going to be able to recycle it. It's resin and stainless steel wrapped. Other parts of it have some toxic materials in them. So this is not an easy job to take down 50 or 60 turbines. But then you've also got your collection lines. How deep are they talking about their collection lines being?
48 inches,
Or 4 feet.
It's not enough.
4 feet.
It's got to be at least 5 feet in this climate. You know how deep they were in Cohocton? They used a chisel plow.
Yeah.
Down that deep. I saw it. I took pictures of it. So, but you got to rip all that stuff out of there. So figure $500,000 to $1 million.
On the decommissioning cost, isn't that where they need to get their bonds to cover that?
Well, they don't have to do anything because they walk away.
No, but I'm saying like the town board.
The town board
They
should,
knew that they need to put this in.
they need to establish, paid for by the developer, decommissioning fund.
Right.
But remember, you can't sue the developer. Well, you can, but there's nobody there. There's nobody home. It's an LLC, single purpose corporation. It never has assets. Now, if let's say a check goes to the LLC, somebody 2 stories up from there takes care of that check and puts it into the corporate account. Never goes through the local account. There are no local accounts. They're LLCs. There's nothing there.
If those collection lines, what's the reasoning, if they're 5 feet deep or 4 feet deep, what's the reasoning that they have to be taken out of there, because when I called about decommissioning at 60 feet, I was told that they would just take like 5 feet of concrete off the top and then just fill it in with topsoil.
And that's up to, that's up to the regulations, whatever your regulations are.
I thought there might be a,
Well, on the collection lines, there actually may be a salvage value there. They are covered, there may be a salvage value. And I think, well, in Cohopton, really easy to get out. If they're 5 feet, it'd be a little more stress, but it's still quite doable. And of course, the shift in land use from an absolutely beautiful, quiet environment that we have today to mega industrial complex. Tourists, by the way, do not like wind turbines. Ireland found that out a few years ago when they put 2 turbines out on the Ring of Kerry. And all of a sudden, people stopped going to the Ring of Kerry. They stayed over in the next county to the east. So they don't have any more than 2 turbines in Ireland. Germany has had, the last time I looked, on land. Nearly all of them are in the southern part of the country, known as Bavaria, in the Black Forest. And that's a big tourist area. Huge tourist money comes in there. It's dropped more than half because people don't want to, see these beautiful mountains out there covered with turbines. They're not going to pay to do that. I would guess that in the Finger Lakes, we would lose a substantial amount of tourism money if turbines came in. People come to the Finger Lakes because of its natural beauty, not because of its industrial. Now, what about property values? What happens if you have a turbine near your property? What happens to the value of your property? How much?
As much as 45%.
We have some that are 80. Jim and Judy Hall's house, when they built it, was appraised by the bank at over $1 million. It's now appraised at $175,000. Why? Because you can't sleep in the house. Well, Jim can actually. He's a little different. He can sleep. Judy and Blair, their daughter, they can't sleep in the house most nights. So they travel a lot. So, but at the same time that the property values are going down, your tax rates are going to go up. Because of course the property values down means I file with my assessor and say, my place was worth $200,000, now it's worth $20,000, so I want my assessment changed, the tax rolls go down, so tax rates have to go up. It's what's happened at every turbine site we've seen.
I have a question. When you got rid of the e-kitchen or whatever, did your town board change or give you guarantees that, if another company came, that the property value, that they would have to guarantee the property values would not go down? Or
No, what we did was we changed our zoning so that any commercial industrial project gets the same scrutiny. We don't really talk about, okay, if it's a wind turbine, it's this or that. It's what is the impact on the views from our comprehensive plan. Everybody know what shadow flicker is? Okay. I only experienced it personally one time. I was going over to see Jim and Judy in Cohocton. I started down the road, and all of a sudden, I did this. Because a shadow flicker was coming at me from the sun behind a turbine over here. And I calculated based on the distance, the flicker was coming at me at probably around 300 miles an hour. That's like scares the hell out of you. It's my goodness. Now, I don't know if you get used to that. I don't know. But it certainly is an issue. All right. Okay. We've talked about some issues that can be arguable already. But what's really most important to me is the impact that it has on the people who live near a wind turbine project. And I got a list of a whole bunch of scientific studies from around the world that basically say, if you're too close to the turbines, it's going to make you sick. Now, that's not everybody, because we're not all the same. Some people are more robust than others. But we have seen home after home after home, people getting sick. Now, next slide, please. Back in '09, there were concerns coming to the Province of Ontario Department of Health from people who were living near some new turbine projects just on the north, above the northern shore of Lake Erie in Ontario. And there was enough credibility to these complaints and, medical files and things like that, that people were being impacted in a negative fashion. Again, not everybody to the same extent. Let's say you got 3 turbines lined up in a row here. That's going to be a lot different than just 1 turbine over there. So what they said they wanted, they told, the Department of Health said to the American or Canadian Wind Energy Association, we want an expert literature study. And we're going to choose the experts. You're going to pay for it. So the health department picked, I can't remember how many, there were a large number of researchers. And they didn't do any new research. They did just the study of the existing body of research. And they came to the conclusion, and they first coined this phrase, wind turbine syndrome, which means it's a group of symptoms that together make up a disease. You can get the next slide here, please. So here's 6 of the syndromes that were identified. That's 6 of them. I want you to think about putting your children to bed. Putting your children to bed at 8 or 9 in the evening with ear pressure, vertigo, nausea, visual blurring. If anybody wants a copy of this, leave me your email. I'll send it to you. Ringing in the ears, how are the kids going to sleep? They're not. Now, is that true every night? No, because some nights things aren't operating, right? They don't operate every day. They don't operate every night. Now, let's go to the next slide, please. Here's some more. Racing heartbeat was really difficult for me to fall asleep if my heartbeat was up around 160. That would be tough to do. Irritability. That's not pleasant either. What about irritability with the kids? Concentration and memory is talked about in many, many, many papers that are dealing with sleep deprivation. And after a certain amount of sleep deprivation, you're not very good at thinking anymore. Not very good at thinking. The internal pulsing and quivering, that my friend Steve Trude says every time I lay down in bed, I can feel my internal organs vibrate. So if in fact somebody who weighs 180 pounds feels his organs vibrating, what do you think it's doing to little people? What do you think it's doing to the unborn babies out in your barn? Oh, what it's doing in a thoroughbred farm out in Indiana was killing. Okay? Spontaneous abortions, genetic misfunctioning. This is the issue when it comes to industrial wind. This situation here, I just got to check it. 2 friends of ours, named Judy and Hal, lived near the halls up on this hill where they have all the turbines. And they even agreed to put a turbine on the property because although they read about the noise issues, the developer said, you know what, it's going to be just like having a refrigerator at 1,000 feet from you. I said, that's going to be like 1 or 2 decibels, or 0 decibels. You can't hear a refrigerator at 1,000 feet. So Hal and Judy did that. It turns out that there were 2 other turbines being built by the same developer. So they have 3 turbines on their bedroom side of the house, all within 1,500 feet. So they couldn't sleep in their house. Now Judy, she was 5th generation on the farm they were on, okay, up in the hills of Cohocton. Hal was a retired attorney who was also a town justice. They're really good, nice, healthy people. The first week the turbine started to operate, Judy began to have severe migraines. She never had migraines before. She never got sick. She was a very healthy farm girl. And we could begin to see health begin to fail about 6 to 10, 12 months later. They would actually go up to Canandaigua sometimes 2 or 3 times a week to get a hotel so they could sleep. They're both dead. They're both dead. Okay? The wind turbines killed our friends. These were good people. Hal came down with all kinds of heart disease. He had no heart disease in his family. He had no symptoms. But the syndrome, all these different things going on. That's how why Jim Hall had a heart attack. And his cardiologist said, "You know any symptoms?" Stress. Stress caused the heart attack. Fortunately, he's recovered. Move right. One more. Okay. Now, you've all been up near wind turbines, have you? They're not very noisy, are they?
Depends on when you go.
Depends on when you go, but I mean, you usually hear your blower there, the ventilation fan. If the turbine's being moved, you get all these grinding of the gears. Same thing if they're moving the blades. There may be some other noises, but quite honestly, they don't make very much noise that we hear. Audible noise is relatively minimal. Okay? It's probably not very much different than a lot of stuff you'd see on a working here on a working farm. Working farms can make a lot of noise, you know. So the audible noise is relatively sporadic and variable. It's the infrasound that are sound waves that are below the audible frequencies we hear. Now, I'm sure that you may have some young people in your town who have big woofers and subwoofers in their cars. And I find that I feel it in here, and I kind of hear it, but I feel the thump. It's thumping me here. That's an infrasound, but nowhere near down to the frequency level of the infrasound in here. These infrasound have wavelengths of over 20 feet, so they carry a lot of energy. That's why they can vibrate your organs. Now, let's talk about where infrasound comes from. You got a turbine blade that's, how big are the turbine blades in the 4.2s? Anybody know?
They said like, was it 300 feet across or something like that, or is it?
Oh, more than that. The
Is it?
1.5s are
Yeah,
160.
yeah.
500 feet across, 250.
So,
500.
So you've got this massive blade, and the width of the blade is probably a third of the width of this room, maybe half of the width of this room, and the big ones, the 4.2s. So that blade is coming down one at a time, and the wingtip of a blade, of the small blades, the 1.5s, they run at 184. That's their peak speed, miles an hour. The bigger ones, because they're longer, are going to have to be much more than that. So let's just get, they're going at 250 miles an hour. So that huge piece of that blade that comes across the tower's round steel. Now the ones for the 1.5s are 13 feet in diameter, the bigger ones are obviously bigger. So the blade coming down is pushing this air at well over 200 miles an hour. I think that blade is, how long is that blade? 160, 200 feet. So this massive blast of air hits the tower. All that energy bounces off that tower, and that is the infrasound that you're feeling at home. And if I'm the tower here, it's going out 180 degrees that way, because that's the circle of the tower. Okay, you can only go off half the tower. If the blade comes down here, it can't go off the back of the tower. So, but the issue we have is it's not just one tower. And when the smaller ones are operating, that thump is going to be every 3 seconds when it's operating at capacity. The bigger ones are going to be more frequently, and probably it's going to be on a logarithmic scale in terms of the amount of increase. So rather than being like double, it's going to be much more than that. Much more. Next slide, please. So infrasound is responsible, as we understand it, for all the health and quality of life issues. And there is nothing you can do about it other than move. You can't block it out. I was over at Hal and Judy's a few years ago with the director of the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. He wanted to learn a little bit more about this. And they have a beautiful house. We're sitting in their living room, and there was a glass shelf over here, and there was a glass on the glass shelf. And it vibrated, fell off. And I said, Hal, what's going on? He said, well, it's not, my turbine isn't moving. He said, I did the research. It's the turbine that's the furthest away. That's the one that's in the bedrock. So it propagates through the bedrock into my basement. My whole house shakes. This is not something you want to have near you. Okay, next slide, please, Ryan. Okay, we talked about the mechanism, atmosphere and bedrock, but body mass makes a huge difference. The bigger the body mass, the more you're going to be able to absorb that without, serious problems. But obviously adults like Hal and Jim, they're pretty big people. They got heart problems, cardiac problems because of the infrasound. When you think about infants, when you think about unborn children, elderly, I'm an elder spokesman these days. I'm an ombudsman with the Office for the Aging, volunteer. And many elderly do have compromised immune systems. So they're going to be much more susceptible to illness issues as a result of this syndrome, turbine syndrome. Next slide, please. And did I mention also, we do a whole lot of references on issues with regard to livestock. A lot of issues. Spontaneous abortions, genetic issues in horses and calves and things like that. So I would never allow any of my children or grandchildren to get anywhere near one of these projects. Never. I got 8 grandchildren, and I would never let them anywhere near one of these projects. And to think of living near one of these, it's, all you have to do is do your own research. You find story after story after story of abandoned houses because you can't sleep. You can't sleep. The one thing you can do to protect yourselves is to have reasonable setbacks. So the proposal from the developers in Cohocton and up on the St. Lawrence and Clayton, and there were 3 towns on the St. Lawrence, they wanted 800 feet from property lines. Okay? Some people say residences. I would go property lines. Prattsburg, Italy, they wanted 1,000 feet from property lines. But what the health departments have said in Ontario, in Australia, Maine, Massachusetts, is these guys are at 6,600 feet, which is more than a mile, and these guys are 13,000, which is almost 2.6, 2.7 miles. And yet, our own experience in Prattsburg and Cohocton is that at 2.5 miles, you still have some of these impacts. Now, we've got 1.5 megawatt units there. You come in with 4.2s? I'm not sure that 2.5 miles is a safe setback anymore. And we'd like to have, somebody like Thor Van de Heij, except he's in medical school, go and do the calculations, because they would know how to do that. But the impact from a 4.2 would be, I'm guessing that you would have serious issues at well over 2 miles from the turbine. But then also think about the fact that you've got multiple turbines there. You're not just worried about one. And so these are all going to build up and grow as they come in. So if you're, let's say, within 2.5 miles of 5, 6, 7, 8 turbines, there's going to be serious issues that you need to know. And the health issues these are nasty health issues. We did use for a while, sleep deprivation as a form of torture to make really bad people talk. And it works. But it's not something that we want to have in our bedrooms. Next, please. So this is really the choice that it comes down to. The developers will never accept safe setbacks because it's less money for them. They're going to go someplace else where they can keep their profits up. I mean, if we had, and the other thing is, one of the laws here is a setback from a current residence.
We just had that at our last planning board meeting. Didn't somebody say here at the planning board meeting, what if we have farther setbacks? And Ben said, well, it won't make the project profitable.
Sean said that, or not Sean.
I said something about it.
Ben, somebody
Yeah.
said
But when you're doing setbacks, you don't want to do it from residences, okay?
no, you want to do it from property.
You want to do property lines because you can't take away my right to build a guest house on the other side of my property.
We mentioned that too, and they keep saying, it wasn't, they said that
But again,
they aren't going to take our land or something.
remember Ontario came out, I think they're going to be revising theirs, but they said at a start, it's going to be 1.5 miles. That's what it's going to be. They did grandfather the ones that were already built. But, I'll get into some of the energy aspects in a few minutes, because there's no rational reason why we are considering, anybody's considering putting wind turbines in upstate New York. This doesn't make any sense. Okay. Next, please. Andrew Cuomo, who is not a friend of mine, does have a plan for upstate New York that he worked out with the Public Service Commission. He came up with a clean energy standard, as a lot of other states, particularly left-leaning states, were doing. And I think the most aggressive I saw was at 25%. They said by some year in the future, we should have 25% of our energy from renewable sources. Well, Andy said he wants to be the biggest guy on the block. So he says, we're going to do 50% from wind and solar by 2030. That's called the 50-30. From an engineering standpoint, you can't do it. It's a purely political thing to polish his green creds for his run for the White House. I've spent time with this guy. He's different. He's different. So the PSC said, now remember, the reason for Article 10 was to allow us to site power plants near demand. Okay, we export electricity from here, so you should never site a power plant here, right? And somebody told me we still got capacity at the falls. So the intent here was we're going to get away from all the NIMBYs and the Hudson Valley and down by Indian Point and Tappan Zee Bridge, get rid of all those NIMBYs down there, and we're going to build power plants where the demand is. It's in New York City. It's in Long Island. It's not here. We export electricity from here. So the PSC came out, and I've got this documentation, I think, with me. They came out with their plan that said, okay, of the 50% that has to come from wind and solar, we'll put 20% of that into solar downstate. But all the rest is going to be in upstate. All the wind turbines. Now, I did a calculation on 3 megawatts. You got to remember, they talk about, they'll say something like, oh, this project has 100 megawatt capacity, and therefore it can power 42,000 homes. I made up those numbers, by the way, but a huge number of homes. That's if they are operating at capacity 24 hours a day. Now, here, I'm guessing you're under where we are. We would be at 15% at 1,800 feet above sea level, okay? And some of our hills are 2,200 feet above sea level. So you're probably going to be in the 9, 10, or 11, which means you're talking about 50,000 turbines. I mean, this is simple, it's insanity. It's insanity. Now, only in Albany could that happen. Only in Albany. So next, please. All right. As a minimum, we stop all renewable development in the state. We don't need the energy. We don't want our land destroyed. We don't want our property values. We don't want our kids getting sick. Okay? So that's not negotiable. No more renewables in upstate New York. The generation has to be on the lower Hudson or Long Island. We have no transmission capacity. Every kilowatt of electricity that is generated here is grounded. There's no place to put it. We have no capacity, either in distribution, collection, or transmission. Now, the really, really good news, probably the most good news that I've got for you tonight, is a 12 or 14-page interview that was in a regional magazine a few years ago. The magazine is Commonwealth. It's kind of serves Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And this is an interview with the guy who runs the fusion and laser and plasma science laboratories at MIT. So he's probably like one of the 4 or 5 smartest physicists in the whole world. The guy's really smart. And he goes down through in the first half of this article and lays out all the breakthroughs that they've achieved over the last 12 to 14 years. A tokamak, which is like a reactor that's operating at temperatures of 100 million degrees. That's a lot. That's really good. But you need those kinds of temperatures in order to make fusion work. Does everybody know what fusion is? You know what fission is? Fission is the atomic bomb that used uranium. Well, then we built a fusion bomb and set that off in 52. And fusion is a technology that is the sun. The sun is a gigantic fusion reactor. Uses the same fuel, hydrogen, that we would use here. Okay? Fusion creates a tremendous amount of energy in a very small space. This guy says the fuel cost, if they did it for Cambridge, for example, the city they live in, so the fuel cost per resident would be 22 cents a year. That's what it costs. And it would probably be distributed in smaller reactors. There is no radioactivity in fusion. All of your byproducts are safe to dispose of. And what happens with fusion is the cost of electricity drops. So if there's anything else you wanted, it's a fossil fuel today, you don't need to keep digging up fossil fuels. Just make them. Electricity's cheap. I used to be a chemist. You can make anything cheaply with electricity.
Is that crystal energy I'm reading about now that everybody wants you to invest money in? Is that a fusion power? No.
It's probably a total scam. Fusion is limited by the amount of investment we use and also by how good a job we do in the planning process. Right now, MIT's doing their thing, UR's doing their thing, RPI's doing their thing, French are doing their thing, Japanese are doing their thing. If there's one thing that we need out of Washington, it's to take a lead and say, we are going to go for this. Because this guy here says, I'm going to have a reactor online in 12 or 13 years. Online in 12 or 13 years. And it's going to be the size that would take care of my whole county, Gates, plus probably Schuyler, probably half of Ontario. And they're very small reactors. They will also eventually be used to replace all the other fission reactors aboard ships. Because those are all fission reactors in your subs and your cruisers and your aircraft carriers. So what's amazing to me about this, because I've been following this for a long time, and the old story was fusion's about 50 years away, but always will be 50 years away. So now you got the smartest guy in the world on fusion saying, you know what? It's coming. And with fusion, you don't need a transmission system. You generate it locally. Think of what this means for a country like Africa. Think what it means for South America. Most people don't have electricity. So you build small fusion reactors and deploy them. You don't build transmission lines to all these small villages. You just get really little reactors, and they're safe. Have you read about this in any newspapers? No. Why? There's a whole lot of people that don't want to think that fusion is going to work. Who? Oh, the people who are making money generating electricity today. People are selling fossil fuels. All that stuff. There's huge lobbies out there. But I'm going to go see our senator, state senator, on Thursday, and we're going to talk about this and what this means in terms of good policy for us.
I just lost this.
Oh boy. Try to get it back, and if you can't, I'm just going to keep going because we're going to get into Article 10, open meetings law, conflicts of interest. You don't necessarily need the slides. I would like to have it.
Oh, you got it.
Gotta get down on the, says continue, I think, on the bottom.
See it?
Down
No, you get it. Ah, jumping around. Can you just get the cursor over to continue? There we go.
Is that fusion considered a renewable energy?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, it is. Well, you end up having, products of that, but it's basically utilizing hydrogen. Hydrogen is the fuel, and you can generate all the hydrogen you want with electricity. You simply take an anode and cathode, put it in water, comes oxygen and hydrogen. So it's one of these things like it's so simple. It's a wonderful, amazing thing. You know, we're looking at that sun now for a long, long time. So when are we going to get that energy down here? Now it's, in near view. It doesn't make any difference if it's 10 years or 15 either, because whichever it is, you can fully deploy it around the world by 2040 or 2050, and all of a sudden that other thing people are concerned about, which is carbon dioxide, will never ever be an issue. And you know what? As a farmer, I like carbon dioxide. If they take all the carbon dioxide away, I can't grow anything, and we all die. So carbon dioxide is also a very nice little molecule to have with it. Let me, while you continue working. So the last thing we had up there as a bullet after fusion was whatever makes sense locally or regionally, that's what you use. If you've got natural gas nearby, use natural gas. You got coal, use coal. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. The future is near, okay? And the technology you use on an interim makes no difference whatsoever. People say, oh, coal's dirty. Hey, for 10 years, it's cheaper to build a new oil plant. One more, please. Okay, Article 10. The purpose of this, as I mentioned before, was to allow us to site power plants down in the New York City area. Now, it's being used to site 40,000 turbines in upstate. And there is zero transmission capacity. That's what this whole article here, this came from the New York Independent Systems Operator. They're the people that run our entire grid system. And they wrote all these comments, 14 pages, explaining in a nice way that your plan is asinine. It won't work. You can't get electricity from here to New York City. If you build a new transmission line, you have tremendous line loss. Tremendous line loss. They're having problems with line loss in Europe at 50 miles from the offshores. Okay? It's 280 miles to New York City. Don't even, because you do have to go, you have to go east and then south. There's no capacity over the Catskills. You have to follow the thruway in 87. But again, I don't want to get into anything Trumpian, but there is something to be said about having a press where reporters have become repeaters. And a narrative is put out there, and the narrative simply becomes real because that's what somebody said. And here's the real story. It's about fusion. It's about stopping this, and that's what I'm going to be talking to Senator Maher about on Thursday.
Do you have a phone number? I've tried to call the Niagara Power Authority, and there's no phone numbers to reach them. The one that's on their website takes you right to New York City to talk to somebody.
I haven't talked to any power authorities.
Okay.
But,
Good luck, sir.
That's what
Better try that.
so, Article 10 is being misused. That's something else I'll talk with Timmons on Thursday about. This will never happen, this 40,000 turbines. It'll never happen because at some point somebody's going to realize, we haven't done anything to create usable clean energy because these 40,000 turbines can't send it anyplace. So they won't build 40,000. They'll build a few more, and I would expect that within the next few years, particularly if Cuomo is not reelected, I don't think he's going to run again after this. I think we can enlighten enough of our legislators and senators to get them to stand up for upstate. Andrew Cuomo doesn't give a rap for upstate. He lives in Manhattan. He doesn't live in Albany. He lives in Manhattan with his girlfriend. Okay, what are we going to talk about next? How about open meetings law? That would be fun, wouldn't it? It's always exciting to talk about open meetings law. Just read through this if you would. You agree that that should be your right? Because if we don't, it's not enough just to understand what the board decided. We need to hear how they came to that conclusion. What did they consider? What didn't they consider? Who led the discussion? Okay? So this is kind of like the introduction to the Open Meetings Law. Next, please, Rhonda. Okay. The Open Meetings Law limits executive sessions. That's when what the board has to do is actually have a motion. I move to go into executive session for the purpose of a personnel discussion. You can't just go into an executive session or move that and vote on that. You have to give one of these reasons. Public safety, the identity of law enforcement, criminal offense, litigation, collective bargaining, union negotiations, or personnel disciplinary matters. Those are the only reasons. There are no others. And they have to say which. And any motion that is made in executive session must be part of the meeting notes. The exact motion made and who voted for it and against it. That must be there. You will not include in the meeting notes, the board meeting notes, what was said in executive session. But you do have to identify that's one of these reasons.
So are minutes taken during the executive session to the public?
Are minutes taken? It depends on what the town does. See, different towns have different rules. Some towns say the only thing that we're going to, actually, in many cases, the clerk is excluded from session too. So there wouldn't be anybody taking minutes.
That's what I was.
Yeah. No, what has to come out is this is a motion that was made and carried or not carried.
But in the minutes, it does have to say that executive session took place and why it took place.
Even before that, you have to have, while it's still an open meeting, Brad, I move that we adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing the current union negotiations. Do I have a second? Second, we vote. All that is done in front of the people. And I would be, at my board meetings, I would say, don't worry, folks, we're not going to be long. It's just a couple of little items. We'll be back in 10 minutes. But we can either go in the office or you can go outside. This winter, don't always go outside. But yeah, that has to be there and it's reflected in the minutes. But you have a right to know.
And when they come back in, if they've made a vote on something, they have to tell, or it has to go in the minutes.
It has to go in the minutes.
It has to go in the minutes, what they voted on and who voted for.
Well, but the voted on is going to be very general. Very general. Okay, let's move on to something even more fun than open meeting law, that's conflicts of interest. Now, I don't really want to talk about this town on this subject, but these are 3 definitions of conflict of interest. So just go through those and see if you have any questions. Because they're a little different.
So if we have a number of people on the board that are being paid right now, or we're carrying permits, petitions for people to get on another facet to put water in water districts, that would be considered a conflict.
I don't know about the water districts piece, but certainly if somebody has a lease from the wind turbine company, they cannot be involved in deliberations on anything to do with the wind company. Because they have a vested interest in it going through. And that's deliberations. They cannot participate in deliberations. I think your attorney here has a different opinion. He's wrong. Go back to that first slide. You have the right to know how they came to a decision. That's our right as citizens. So, no. You've gotten very bad advice from an attorney who's probably a little bit conflicted himself. Now I want to talk about a few actual conflicts of interest that we saw in a few other towns. Next slide, please. Okay, And the towns, I'm not going to say which was in which town, but this is Cohocton, Howard, Prattsburg, and Italy. 1 week, the planning board members, I think none had ever had a new car before, had new cars. That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. We had standard agreements for some board members, or for others, we had enhanced agreements. So maybe this was the 3,000 per turbine up here per year. This one might have been like the 40,000 or 50,000 per turbine a year, special agreements. And of course, they can't show you any of these. Property buyouts, zoning commission members. That was actually in my town. That was in Italy. And we had some members of our zoning commission who didn't like the fact that turbines were coming up near their houses. Both their houses are worth about $175,000. So the town supervisor ordered Echogent to buy those people out and make them happy. So those two families there, plus at least one other, received for their $175,000 house, how much? 500,000. And that, of course, was public knowledge because it goes with the deed transfer. It was in the paper. So the Mr. and Mrs. Christmas, that's their name, they got $500,000 for $175,000. Cash paid directly to town board members. Yet all their meetings in Cohocton were at a B&B just south of North Cohocton.
Do any of these people go to jail for breaking these laws?
Can't get enforcement yet. Remember, I'll talk about that in a minute or two. But the developer from First Wind, he used to stay at this B&B. It was a big B&B on 337, a beautiful place. It has since burned to the ground. But the owner of the B&B, she would serve them. They'd say they would do their town meetings there in the dining room of the B&B. They wouldn't do them at the town hall. These are all meetings kind of off the books. And so she'd hear all this stuff going on. And so after one of these meetings, when she's listening to the board members say, well, we need 10,000 more for this and 20,000 for that, he says to her, I'm not doing it anymore, I'm not paying anymore. He did it. But this woman testified to the Attorney General's office at my house. Okay? But then Andrew Cuomo said to his people, you can't investigate that. Upstate doesn't matter. So let's move on one more, please. Just want you to understand that there is a complaint notice online in the Public Integrity Bureau. And if you're going to do that, and Rob and I talked a little about this before, I recommend that you have an attorney like a Gary Abraham, best municipal attorney in the state. He's a wonderful man. He helped us tremendously. Have him draft a complaint if you're going to go in that direction. Because he will get their attention. If we do it, we might not get their attention. Next, please.
I was hoping, not thinking maybe they would come and some of the people would change their mind, but I guess we're standing by ourselves.
Okay, we've been working with the AG for a while. First meeting was in September of 2007. They really didn't want to hear about it. Then we spoke with the Office for Public Integrity Director in May of 2009. I talked to her for 2 hours, and she was genuinely interested. She said, it's going to take me some time, but I'll get something done. So we then began conference calls with Sally and Andy, both Assistant Attorneys General, and we sent them hundreds of pages of information, and not just from Cohocton and Italy and Prattsburg, but we also got in touch with all the other citizens groups we knew of and said, here's your contacts, if you got stuff, send it to them. So, next slide. So a couple months later, Sally, Andy, an investigator came to the house. It was supposed to be an all-day meeting. But after about 2 hours, they heard just Cohocton. We hadn't gotten to Prattsburg, Italy yet. And they took a time out and said, we're not even getting, skin deep yet. Let's do Cohocton. So they spent the rest of the day until about 9 o'clock at night. And they worked very, very hard from 08 to early 09. And then Sally was reassigned later in 09. And Andy continued, but they basically took away all his tools. He couldn't interview anybody. He couldn't talk to a town official. And his job then became, you've seen the WIND Code of Conduct? Okay, some have. It's something they put together to cover Andrew's butt because he wanted to make sure there was paperwork that said, we'll never do any of these bad things. So that's what the purpose of the Code of Conduct. So then Andy can say, oh, I didn't know that was going on. They sent me a Code of Conduct saying they were in accord with all of our objectives. So that's what Andy did for the rest of his time with OAG. He just received them, copied them, and passed them on. Next, please. No interviews, reviewing, he quit earlier 212. He's now a life coach. He's a wonderful man, doing great things. He's very happy, doing very well. Anything else, Robin, that we missed?
I don't know if anyone has any questions for
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
anyone have any questions at all?
You said anybody that's got a lease is not, no conversation whatsoever about rate, what, for rights, if that's what the issue is.
I'm not following.
No deliberations.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to-
They cannot talk.
They should not be in the deliberations, no, because they've got a vested
They
interest.
definitely can't vote.
No, they can't deliberate.
What is
Because the-
deliberate? Give us the definition of deliberate.
Deliberate would be the discussion that the four of us would have about the issue in front of us. I might say, well, I think we ought to do this, and they say, well, what about doing that, or, well, how much is it going to cost? It's our discussion that leads us to make a motion. Okay?
Now, like we're at our planning board meeting, 2 members have leases, and they both spoke. And one of them asked Ben straight out, if these fall in place, what's it gonna do for you? And that when Ben said they were gonna have problems, they weren't gonna be gaining that. Now, he had that right to ask that. He has a lease.
Well, if he can ask a question, but deliberation, no, he cannot participate in deliberations. Because he's not, you expect, that what's the purpose of government in this country? There's one thing it's supposed to do.
Protect the vote.
It's to promote the health and general welfare of the public. That's at the core of what they do. So if someone's personal interest, my desire to get 4 leases is important to me, you know what? Maybe I am more important than the rest of you folks because I'm getting $40,000 a year. And this kind of stuff, violation of open meeting laws, is an epidemic in the state of New York. It's an epidemic. I mean, our board did it back, 15 years ago. They came, even in the town hall, on a day that the town hall is locked, they had a meeting. So, I mean, it's a pattern. And did we have something in there? I guess we did. Didn't have anything in there about some of the other criminal activities.
How about a board member that's on the board and before the meeting at the town, they're outside talking to the head officials of Apex. And when I asked them about it, they said it was none of my business.
No? They're putting themselves at serious risk. I mean, they can't be doing that. They just can't be doing that.
because it's happened a couple times now.
But the other thing is, today, they could be on the phone with each other for 3, 4, 5 hours. We don't know that. We don't know. But there are a lot of criminal activities that virtually all of the developers have been found to be in violation. One of them is basically market allocation. No farmer, no landowner that we've ever seen ever got 2 developers coming to sign up a lease. They allocated Cohocton, had a red line around it for First Wind, part of Kratzburg in Italy, had a line around it for Ecogen, and never the 2 did cross. The same thing is true up on the St. Lawrence. Town A is Iberdrola, Town B is somebody else, Town C is somebody else. And again, the same thing as some of the ones near here. The developers initially come to the large landowners, who in many, many cases are also on boards, and they get everything worked out. Howard is the poster child for that.
But we can't get the data from the Met Towers because that would be, proprietary information. We can't turn that out to their competitors. But there's no competitors because you're saying that they're probably all blocked off and.
Well, the wind maps are public documents, and I did a lot of work with them and found out that about 15 years ago, the wind maps were being revised. The wind map from 15 years ago is Class 4, no Class 5 winds any place in the state. Class 4 winds we have on some portions like around Oswego on Lake Ontario, and Long Island has some Class 4 winds as well. It's pretty breezy down
I've
there.
got one question about the secrets.
Well, let me just finish one thing. So where we are, we have barely Class 3 winds. We're stronger to almost Class 3. They created a wind map that showed their project in the town of Italy located in Class 4 wind with this irregular shape. And it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not even the highest hill. The highest hill is over there blocking it. So I called the people, this was a company down in Connecticut, Massachusetts, who was building these. TWS True Wind is its name. I don't know why I remember that. But I said, look, why are you creating these false documents? And he started to argue with me, and I said, look, we didn't all of a sudden get stronger winds in this hill. They're the same they've been since 1958 when we got here. Okay? Why are you falsifying the documents that are going to the state? And finally he said, well, they want us to kind of enhance them and make it look better for the people who are going to be buying into the project because there'll be better returns. I said, so we're submitting forged documents to the government. And he said, well, I wouldn't use that word particularly, but so it's so antitrust. The other part of antitrust, in addition to the market allocation, is that they just all work together. Every one of these big infrastructure companies is in bed with all the rest of them. And I'm guessing that the AWEA meetings, that's when they all get together and say, okay, who wants this part of Iowa? Who wants that? Let's give us your best bid. But they will lie whenever they can. I mean, Ecogen in all of its paperwork, all submissions, describes itself as an industrial scale power producer in New York State. They never generated anything. They built strip malls. That was their business. And at one point they were doing projects, trying to do projects in Wyoming County, 2 counties up north, and then over in Steuben and Yates. And they're kind of gone now. But they will say anything they want to say. It's sad.
I've got one question about the secrets, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Are all the wind companies required by the state to come in and do a secret to identify historical sites within the town before they start the project on Met Towers and the wind tower project itself? because there's been a lot of talk between the town and Apex, back and forth. And Apex is saying, oh, they don't have to do secrets, they don't have to do secrets. Well, I don't know, they've already put Met towers up in some areas that are turned out to be, they might be historical sites. And this wind project they've got now, for these 49 wind turbines, I've got proof that they are on historical land.
Well, the big issue with any of the environmental quality reviews is that the developer is paying engineering firms to deliver what they want, which is a document that says the impact here is minimal. That's what they're being paid to do. And I can't remember the name of the engineering firm out of Rochester that lives off this stuff. And they build by the page, and yet you pick up a seeker for this town, a seeker for this town, a seeker for this town, and the subsections are all the same. Only the names would change. It's
So
just the same stuff. There's absolutely no science or engineering in any of the seekers.
they're required to do one separately for the Met towers.
I don't know about that.
That's what I'm trying to
I don't know.
find out.
I know they did not do any for the Met Towers in our,
Because,
because it was intended to be temporary.
right, some of the, well, they keep reapplying for extended permits for the Met towers now. Some of the Met towers that are on there now are questionable on whether they're not a historic land or not. Well, I have proof that the turbine project will be on historic land that they built, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, the State Historical Society needs to be informed.
Yeah. It's, I've got some information on that.
One thing that's done to slow them down is to get the legislature to recommend not giving a payment in lieu of taxes or a pilot. We've got 4 counties in this state that have done that now: Jefferson, Oswego, Cattaraugus, and Chautauqua. When you don't give them local money through a pilot, it hurts them a lot, and they reconsider whether to do this. And the legislature can do this very easily. They recommend to them IDA. So what's happening in this county? Is your IDA issued a pilot already?
There's been some going on about it. I think it was brought up a couple meetings ago, wasn't it, George? About the initiation of
That's what they were gonna start.
pilot or something.
Yeah.
But nobody was found out about it until the last couple meetings ago, I think it was.
Remember, the pilot is there, they're getting a break on taxes because they're creating jobs.
Yeah.
The truth is, they're not creating jobs. The jobs they create during construction are people from out of state. Okay? And they stay in motel rooms with $4 a room, and that's it. And nobody's making money. But you really got to push them. You really got to push them on the job creation. They're required to identify the job title, the rate of pay, and the number of people. This should be a long document. If you're going to give them a tax break of let's say, 10, 15 million a year, which is what it would be with turbines this size, they should be. How many jobs should they be creating? 1,000, 500 permanent, regular jobs. And I think that's the one I really push the IDA on. Look, they're coming in here with imports, and that's all. They're importing people, and they're going to all be gone. I mean, there's one technician left, but the technician is probably not an employee. He's probably just a contractor, because they don't want to have employees. They'd have to put him on the Boston payroll to do that.
You can figure it out. It was $461,000 per job in Cattaraugus County for the energy. $461,000 worth of your tax money given to that company per job. It's just, you can figure it out if you have a pilot coming. Your IDA can stop this. Your legislature can stop it with one simple action.
Yeah,
No pilot.
the problem we saw in Steuben County on that was the IDA was one person and the secretary, and he did whatever he wanted to do. Now, he had a board, but the board was made up of members of the legislature, and they all wanted the projects to come in. So basically, I believe that all of these IDAs and other agencies, including NYSERDA, should go away. I mean, NYSERDA is totally complicit in all of the stuff on industrial land. And nothing that comes out of that organization should be trusted. I've been to meetings there many times, and it's just surreal. It's surreal. I mean, I had one woman at lunch tell me that she was from the Adirondacks, and she said, you know, it's gotten so hot because of global warming up the Adirondacks that our farmers are leaving. And I said, I thought the problem you had with the climate in the Adirondack was that you get frost in June and September. She didn't understand what I said. So they would welcome another 7 or 8, 10 degrees in the Adirondacks. They could actually grow hay. Anything else?
Have you ever considered online petition to send to Mr. Trump's office, the Energy Secretary, and then a copy of Mr. Trump's office? Because there's rumors flying around that he's going to cut some of his funding to these turbines. And I think it would be a good way, or a good idea to marshal our forces across.
I think it's a great idea.
And
I don't have time to do it.
exactly that, a well-penned petition with some examples of the corruption that's going on in New York. He's no fan of Andrew Cuomo anyway, so.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, what I would do,
I think it'd be
do you know
smart.
Mary Kay Barton, John?
Pardon me?
Do you know Mary Kay Barton?
I can't hear
Mary Kay Barton?
you. No.
Okay, she's a very, very well-educated activist down to the south of us. I think she's maybe near Varysburg, I'm not sure. She has a big distribution list, and that's the distribution list I would use. I also use Jim Hall's Citizen Power Alliance. And get this petition out and say, and do Sailor Shores listing, get the ones along the St. Lawrence, get every citizens group you can, so you got 50, 100,000. And that's the kind of petition that will get somebody's attention.
Yeah.
And just have it keep building. I did that for an antitrust suit, and we actually ended up getting a few hundred signatures in an antitrust suit. Unfortunately, the Department of Energy doesn't care too much about
I think if we put it out there and publicize the petition was available, we'd get a lot of people to sign it, and the Energy Secretary couldn't ignore it, especially if we sent a copy to the White House.
Well, I think the way to do it is just send out that blank petition and say, sign it and send it back. And send them 100,000 or 10,000, whatever you get. But yeah, I think today,
To go around and have people sign petitions today is crazy. It's the same,
Right.
catch people at home starving.
right,
They're just trying to work all the jobs they can to keep their heads above water in New York. New York is a sinking ship. Every time you call anywhere for anything, every person that's holding state office says there's no money in the budget. There's no money, there's no money. They don't have the money to do that.
yeah, but what we're talking about here is changing our energy policy. It doesn't cost anything to say, okay, we're not going to do renewables, we're gonna go to a midterm strategy that says generate what we can generate most cheaply and effectively until fusion is out there. We don't need these renewables. These turbines will never get taken down. They're gonna be obsolete as soon as fusion is here. Now, the guy heads the lab said it was gonna be 12 years, 12 to 14 years.
Now, what does fusion produce, or what's the byproduct of fusion energy production?
There's no radioactivity whatsoever.
No radioactivity.
No. I mean, but fission takes large atoms and smashes them together. And plutonium is the most commonly one used now in the bombs. Whereas fusion is taking much smaller molecules. That's what the sun does, it
What do
smashes
they use for fuel?
hydrogen. Which is,
Rods, gas, or liquid? Is it rods, or is it gas, or is it liquid?
I haven't seen any of the design. It's going to be a plasma type reaction. There's going to be a plasma, which is a very, very, the 500 million degree Fahrenheit.
What's the byproduct?
They're inert. They're inert. There's no issue with them.
Probably heat, right?
Well, there's a portion of it heat, but you're still going to have. I have to go back to my elemental table to figure out. Okay, if I started with tritium, we're going to end up with oxygen or with hydrogen. I think so. smash the tritium together and get hydrogen. Hydrogen. Well, thank you all for coming, for participating.
One question. We're from Stockton County. There are 3 separate turbine companies gone, and one has gone and produced 38 turbines for Arkwright area. And we followed that fairly closely. 2 weeks after the turbines went up, an attorney appeared and proposed that they sue the company. But part of the suit was that they were to be silent, and no discussion whatsoever of the turbines, the damage to them, the health effects, and all of these people were suffering serious health effects after 2 weeks. Have you heard of this sort of gag order from the people who are victims of this?
Well, if they've signed if they've got a lease, yeah, they're getting it. They have a lease,
So, no, these are people not with leases.
if they have no gag order on them.
Well, I'm saying the attorney has put the gag order on them on the basis of taking their suit. And the suit will last essentially, she said, 5 to 7 years before you see any results. But in the meantime, you're to suffer quietly, silently. And that's what's happened in our county. And I was wondering if that sort of gag order for those people who are suffering those ill consequences is
We
pervasive.
can't see any legal basis on which you can gag someone who isn't, involved in
It's the
it.
basis of the suit. If you want to be part of my suit, and I'm not going to charge you, this is pro bono, but not pro bono, I'm taking full cost, then
Oh.
you're shut down. And if that happens, you're going to have a whole massive silence on the part of the people who are suffering from these things. And I was wondering, how extensive is that sort of thing?
I don't understand why an attorney would do that unless he really just wanted to control the flow of information about the suit.
They have a rationale. And the rationale is that we want to surprise people. We don't want to let them know what we've got. So we want to wait until we get into court. So in the meantime, your daughter is falling out of bed to her knees. Don't talk about it. So we've come up against that as journalists, where people won't talk to us because their lawyer said not to. And they're going to sit there for 5 to 7 years and not say a word to the rest of the people who are suffering.
I think there's enough of a sense of, or a call to action here, that we got to think about doing things differently. And we can't go through a 5-year process. I think you have to figure out, how do you do something to shut them down today, based upon, the type of health issues that we're seeing. Because these are very real. And my friends are dead. They're dead. Turbines killed. Friends are dead.
Mr. Jones, Oyefax USA thanks you for your time spent with us tonight and all the knowledge you spent with us this evening. And I'd also like to thank John Metzler for the introduction and prayer, and all of you in attendance tonight and the audience for coming. I hope you gained information that will help you better understand what a conflict of interest is and renewable energy, and have a wonderful evening for coming. Thank you.